All right, folks. So this is our overall third session for 2022. This probably may be the last session for this year. I'm going to take a break for the last two for the later part of the year, but we will continue from the January sessions, and then we will try to be a little bit more specific as we come closer to that. So this program hopefully will continue for a long period of time. That's my intention. But for this year, as we are already in the almost second week of December, probably this year is the last program before we take a quick break of rest of the December and then start back from January 2023. So today's session, I will be focusing on the SDLC process in Salesforce, which is software development cycle. So can anybody from the audience would like to based on whatever information you have or the way you are working, can just define on a very high level, what does it really mean by SDLC cycle in Salesforce or software development life cycle in Salesforce? If you want, you can raise your hands and I can pick any of you, or however you would like. You can actually speak up as well if you will. So anybody wants to kind of give us an idea about what does a Salesforce life cycle or SDLC cycle means in Salesforce. Any volunteers? I can also check the chat piece. Anybody? That's a good way of interacting with not just me, but obviously we record this session, put on a YouTube, so people will know about your expertise as well and how do you do that. So anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Moyo.
Okay, hi, it's Lillian.
Hey Lillian, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I think it means the whole process from when you are working on a project, from gathering the requirements to analyzing them to building the solution you're coming up with and deployment. So there's like steps to it, I think.
And do you know by chance what are any, like if you know what are the major or the most utilized life cycles that are utilized in Salesforce? Or for that matter, for actual like development?
I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I think Agile is the most recommended by Salesforce. I'm actually studying for my Sales Cloud, so yeah, I'm just
no, very good. This is good. You are in the right direction. Agile is absolutely one, which is highly recommended, and today we will talk about it. But what do you think is opposite of Agile? Let's say if you don't want to follow Agile, do you have any idea what is the other process may called?
Waterfall.
Waterfall. Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I'll take the next person for the further details. So Shams, if you would like to tell us what does it, can you tell us like a high level, what is the difference between the waterfall and Agile?
Yeah, first of all, thank you. I'm sorry if my voice is not coming out clearly since I have joined from my phone. So apologies for that.
It's pretty clear. You're pretty loud and clear. You're good. Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect then. Yes, so I think the major difference would be that in case of waterfall, you do complete development cycle phase by phase instead of repeating a short cycle. Like for example, you completely go through the requirement phase, then design, then development, testing, only for once.
Got it. Got it. And in Agile, what we do normally?
In case of Agile, you normally just gather some requirements and only work on those requirements. And while you are working on them, you have more requirements incoming that you can again work on.
Yeah, very good. So that's Agile, and I'll kind of define that a little bit more, but that's pretty good kind of starting point. Typically, do you think, Shams, how do we normally execute projects in a real world? Let's say, I know you have been engaged with a lot of Salesforce projects. Can you give us a preview that what do you think is, do we actually follow waterfall or do we actually follow agile, or what is the actual implementation model in real world?
Yeah, so from what I have experienced so far, if it's a new deployment or let's say a new project from scratch, we normally follow waterfall, or at least try to follow it, since we are going to set it up from scratch. But if it's a support project, the org is already set up,
Mhm.
pre-configured, and it's just support related work, then you normally follow agile.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good understanding, and thanks, Shams, for providing a feedback. So I can kind of elaborate on this a little bit more. So as we discuss, technically, I mean, there are different other ways of doing it, and you can divide and slice and device into different things. But on a very high level, just for better understanding, because we know there's a mix of experienced consultant as well as new consultants. So I'll try to keep things on a very high level. So on a very high level, there are two ways you can execute a Salesforce development lifecycle project, which is SDLC. And that's not limited to Salesforce. It could be any other software development for that matter. One is waterfall, and the other one is agile. These are two main ones. There are a couple of other variations of them for sure, but these are the two for a very high level understanding. Waterfall, as you can understand from the name of it, how does the waterfall in unidirectional? So from the top to bottom, it's basically one direction. Agile is sort of a back and forth, which means that it's not in one direction, but it's sort of a smaller segments of executing a project. So I can give you an example for a more clarity. Let's say if you are, for example, building a software and it has 10 features. And again, it could be Salesforce, or it could be like a custom development. You can use Python, you can use C language, you can use whatever you want, and it could be Salesforce as well. One way of doing a project is you need to build 10 features as an example. You collect all the information about the 10 features upfront, as Shams explained, that first you need to understand and collect all the requirements. The second phase is you design the whole solution. Third phase is you execute the whole process, like all 10 components. Then you execute the full testing. Then you execute the full UAT, which is user acceptance testing. And once you got approved, then you deploy the whole solution. So this is like a unidirectional, meaning that when you are actually doing the implementation, at no point in time you're going back and redo the design, right? Or you are not going back and recollecting the requirements. It's like a one direction. So you start from the requirement gathering, that's the step one. You go to the next step, which is design a solution, right? Now you're not going back and recollecting the information. Once you design the system, then you moved into the implementation phase where you start building the solution. Same thing again, now you are just in one directional, meaning you are in a one-way street. You are not going back and recollecting more information or redesigning the solution. You're just implementing it at this point. Once you implement it, you just move forward and go ahead and just do the testing or QA. Same thing, like you're fixing whatever is bugs, but you are not coming back into doing a re-implementation, or you're not going back into previous phases. Same thing, once you complete that, you go into UAT based on the feedback. Again, you are not go back and redesign something or whatever. You can just complete the UAT, get approval, and then you deploy the system. So that's a traditional or a unidirectional way of doing a project. And there are a lot of ways that this is also helpful in a lot of different circumstances. For example, if you are trying to, for example, not from the software perspective, but just as a project perspective, let's say you want to build a bridge, right? You do that in the similar manner. You collect the requirements. I need to build a bridge from here to here. And then you collect all the requirements, whatever the weight of it, whatever the wind pressure, whatever the length, whatever structure requirements you need. You collect anything and everything. Then you start the design phase. Then you completely design it. And then you basically go ahead and start building the bridge, and then you basically do your QA work, and then you actually implement it and make it live, right? So it's an example of a unidirectional, which means that there are a lot of scenarios where you do need a waterfall approach, because you need to do a lot of calculation, which on which you need to build a solution, and you cannot always go back and forth. Now, let's quickly understand what Agile is, and then we can maybe have a better understanding between the Agile and Waterfall. Now, in software development, um, in previous times, obviously, it used to do in a waterfall fashion as well, meaning that you start a project, you do all the requirements. But what we have found is because of this process, when you go into the demo phase, which is probably towards the end of the whole cycle. So let's say this example that I just gave you, where you need to build like 10 components. Let's take an example that this whole project will take 10 months to complete. So technically towards, I would say towards the rear part of the project, maybe towards 7th or 8th or 9th month, you actually able to see the demo of the product. And by that time, if you see the demo of the product and you feel like there are a lot of things that need to change in the design side, there were a lot of things which were missed in the requirement gathering sessions, it's too late to make any changes. And you probably be stuck with just building whatever you have built and just go through it. And then you need to maybe come back and either just do the redesigning of the whole thing, halt the project, but basically you don't have a lot of opportunities to go back and redo anything. So, and then they also figure out that a lot of software development or software related technology is also changing with a rapid pace, meaning you started off something, and if you're working on a really big enterprise level projects, and it is very typical even to this date, where some of these big projects can take multiple months, years, it's very common, like, you can start a project mid-size 6 months, a little bit bigger 1 year. If you're working for even bigger enterprise level or government sector projects, you are talking about a couple of years length of projects, which means that if you're working on an enterprise level project and you are ready to do a demo after 2 years, guess what? There are a lot of technologies which are completely changed. There are more better options. There are a lot of other things that you could have utilized, but because you are just following a unidirectional path, you just do whatever you are build, you design it like 2 years back, and then you build on it. So that doesn't feels like a good way of doing the development. That's where this agile concept comes up, which means that in more cases, what we do is we actually divide the project into smaller segments. So let's get back to the same example. You have 10 features that you need to develop. We can divide the projects into 10 months. And what we do is we'll say in the first month, we will develop the first feature, actually develop, design, develop, deploy, UAT, everything in 1 month and ready. And even if possible, make it like a beta live for internal testing or a beta live, if you will, for that matter. So in 1 month, you can actually able to create and launch one of the 10 segments of a project. Obviously, when you go through the whole process for one feature, you explore and understand a lot of shortcomings that you have, and also get a lot of understanding that how is actually going to work. And you can able to, when you move to the next month too, now you are equipped with a lot of actual knowledge of how does this actually look like, because you designed, or if you do not design, but you, the client, or you as a team, you went through the design process, you went through the requirement gathering process, you went through the implementation process, you went through the UAT process, you went through the deployment process, and then you're able to see how does it look like. Client is able to see how does it look like. Client is now know that, okay, this is how it's going to work out. So the next month when it start and you start working on the next feature, now you as a team and the client in general, overall, everybody has a much better understanding of what is needed. So now they will work a little bit better on the second feature. Even they may have some opportunity to maybe fix few shortfalls from the feature one, and then so on and so forth. So basically what you do is you divide the project into smaller segments, take each segment at a time, try to just complete the whole thing and do it. And this is how the Agile works. So this is like a very high level understanding of Agile. And again, once Osama will join, he probably go into more detail and more more knowledge. He will share more knowledge about a little bit more technical terminologies and things of that nature. I'm trying to keep it a little bit simple from the consulting point of view. How does it work in a real life scenarios? So that's a high level. Now, we did talk about waterfall. We did talk about agile. Now, when we actually work in Salesforce ecosystem, now I'm kind of switching into more specific into Salesforce project. When we switch into Salesforce ecosystem and we are working on a project, as Shams explained that there are different scenarios, right? You are doing managed services, you are doing a really long project with with a lot of features, a lot of clouds, things of that nature, versus you have a very specific deployment. You just need to deploy a sales cloud with X number of features, right? Versus you have like a multi-layer, multi-environment, multi-cloud environment where you have multiple clouds, you may have multiple integrations, things of that nature. So there are different scenarios, different type of projects where you need to deploy different methodologies. In most cases, agile is still valid, but maybe not in its pure form. In reality, what I observed, and basically we do it on a day-to-day basis, is there is a third type of methodology, which is more like a hybrid, which means that it's kind of a mix of waterfall and agile. The reason is most of the consulting firms that deploy the projects, in many cases, if the project is given from the client to this Salesforce partner, they need to, in many cases, provide a fixed cost or fixed number of hours. How long would it take for this project to be finished, right? So for example, if somebody as a client comes to us and asks, we want to do this Sales Cloud implementation, and they want us to actually give them a proposal. And what they're looking for is like a fixed price bid, meaning they want to know how much does it gonna cost. So it means that in order to determine the cost, we need to understand how many hours would it take for us to build. And that means that we need to calculate hours throughout the project. What does it entail? Meaning, how many hours does it require for requirement gathering, right? How many hours does it require for the project management for this whole project? How many hours do I have to have required in terms of actual development? If there are some configuration piece, how many hours do I need to have for my admin or a configurator person to invest? I may need to use my architect as well to kind of design the solution. So how many hours do I think I need to have utilized from my architect? Once the solution is ready, we will have internal QA team as well. How many hours do we need to have a QA? The business analyst person who is doing all the requirement gathering back and forth, he will also be engaged in the UAT process, meaning that he will guide and train and go through the UAT process. How many hours are we expecting from the BA to actually run the UAT? And at the same time, we may expect to get some feedback. We might need to do some work. So those hours are also may fallen into development piece, things of that nature. And then we go to the deployments. How many hours does it take for this kind of typical cloud to be deployed? So we need to somehow calculate all these hours in order to give the best perspective. So it means that although we are saying that we will follow the agile methodology, but guess what? We are at the very beginning kind of stuck with this dilemma that we need to kind of somehow envelop this project into a certain activity so that we can able to give the best possible proposal. Because if we provide too many hours, it will become too expensive, and obviously client may or may not take the project or give the project to you. If we give too little just to get the project, because maybe our pricing, maybe we are competing with other partners or other firms, so we'll try to get the project, and we will, let's say if a project will take 1,000 hours on a typical day, but we said, okay, you know what, let's improve our possibility of winning the project, and we can give like 500 hours. Maybe you can well into a winning scenario, but guess what? You may still need to invest those 1,000 hours, which means that you may have a negative ROI. So you cannot really over budget, and at the same time, you cannot really under budget, because if you under budget and win a project, then obviously you are doing this project to make margins, your margins will be very low, or you may get into negative margins. So at the end of it, when I'm saying that we will need to give all of that into a proposal, then technically what I'm saying is you need to really think about it as a whole project, as a waterfall mentality, right? So although, and this is what typically happen, I would say 60-70% of the time, that you do need to do this exercise at the very beginning of the project or a pre-sales part of a project, where you need to go through this whole thing, come up with the thing. And again, it may or may not be 100% accurate, but this will get better and better and better based upon the experience of your team, experience of the company, based on how many projects they have bid, they have worked, and as much experience and as much understanding you have for the work that you are bidding, you get as much better. So that's typically the start of the project. Now, what let's say you provide 1,000 hours, and that's a 10 months project. However, when you are executing the project, at that point in time, what is being typically followed is sort of agile sort of delivery, which means that, again, instead of so basically, we already kind of an architect sort of a high level blueprint of the whole project, right? So we kind of collected all the requirements. We actually kind of did a whole, like a solution design to certain level, maybe not to the pieces, but at least on a very high level. Now, when we get into the implementation, and if we are doing the full waterfall, then we will just implement the whole thing. That's where we made a twist and make it a little bit hybrid, which means that we can implement the project is more like an agile fashion, which means that although we have designed the whole thing, we have complete requirements, but now what we can do is, instead of like full, let's say it required like a 10-month project will require 6 or 7 months of implementation, instead of getting into implementation for 7 months and then come back to client after 7 months to show them a first demo, we will start doing like a sprint or agile process or scrum process, which means that we divide our project into smaller segments. Let's say in 10 segments, we can create 10 sprints. Each sprint will have one feature, and we can create one feature after first sprint. End of the sprint, we can show them the demo and take the feedback, and that feedback will be implemented. Now you already have a good set of requirement for the second feature. However, now based on the requirement from the client, like review of the client, demo from the client, and in most cases, we also give them access to whatever we have built in first phase, so they can have access to that as a user testing, and they can start doing the UAT piece of it. They can keep sending their updated requirements. So now when we starting the second sprint, we'll take some of those feedback again, because we are assuming that we have a lot of experience in Salesforce and we have been doing this for some time. The feedback should be limited to some smaller changes. Now, if the feedback is such that the whole project goal or project scope is changed, then it means that either you haven't done this in the past, right, or the client do not able to provide the requirements right at the first place. So that would be a big challenging project for for the client as well as for the implementation partner. However, if you have enough experience, if you have done this multiple times, then you may have like 5, 10, 15, 20% of some changes, which is very easy to accommodate in the second sprint for the second feature. You may always go back and just tweak a little bit for the feature one, and then you move on in that way. So basically, you divide your next 3 phases, which was from implementation to UAT to going live, that all can be done into agile methodology. And in some cases, I have worked with the client where they actually, after the first demo, they have actually launched the feature for their end clients as a beta or test version for their end clients, not just for internal team for testing, but for end clients. So they build the first feature, they do the full testing in first month, first sprint, they do the UAT, they get approval, they move the environments, and they said, okay, live, and this is the beta version. So they already have this information previously catered to their clients that this is a beta version, and you always have beta clients who can do the testing piece of you for you, and then you can take it from there. So they can actually live it and then every month or every sprint, they can release one feature and keep adding on, keep adding on. And by the end of the project, pretty much 90% of the project is already live, tested. Your internal teams, external team, everybody's comfortable. And then when you close the project at the end of the 10th month, pretty much everybody is very comfortable. You do the final set of training, the final set of documentation, and you close the project. So this is how a typical Salesforce project work in a very good, very kind of a hybrid scenario, so that you can able to not only able to tackle some of the challenges that you may have initially in terms of providing the proposals, but also the challenges that you have in the implementation phase, where you don't want to implement in a secret, where you are building something for multiple months and then just showing a lot of work that is already completed to a client in a demo, and they just don't want this, or they have a lot of feedback which will take a lot of time to fix. So hopefully that would be a little bit helpful to understand how this worked. Any questions, guys, that you have, or on a very high level, any comments that you feel like that you think that is not clear? I would love to get your feedback.
Hey, Khurram. So this is Miraj here. Khurram, do you mind sharing any resources, for example, with respect to Trailhead or anything that we can get started on people who are like transitioning from other ecosystems? So I'm relatively new to Salesforce ecosystem. I've just started around a year ago now, but just keen to understand, what are the best practices that Salesforce has, and anything that you can refer that we can get started on.
Sure. I'm assuming, Miraj, you're asking about the Salesforce technical piece of it, like how to learn the Salesforce platform, or you are talking more from the Agile perspective?
I'm talking more from the Agile perspective.
Okay. So from the Agile perspective, there may be few trails available on Trailhead. I need to go back and check, but I believe once Osama join in the next, I would say 30 minutes, he may able to guide you some of the actual certifications, and some of these certifications are very quick to achieve. They are like 2 days or 3 days workshop that you can able to go and become like a Scrum Master and become like an Agile practitioner, and there are like a couple of different variations also. Again, I'm not really, haven't done that for a long time, so I forgot the names of those particular certification. But once he join in next 30 minutes, he can refer you some of the trainings. Now, those trainings are offered across the board. Obviously, they will cost you money, because typically you will actually receive a certification from, if you're doing from Agile, or if you are getting from whichever, there are different entities who release this, so there's some costs associated with that, but they're pretty nominal compared to any other certification. So maybe a couple $100 for each certification, and there are different types of certifications. So you become a Scrum Master, you can become practitioner, you can become just a Agile specific Agile project or product manager. So there are different variations of them that you can learn. And I personally don't know if there are any. There could be a couple of them in the Udemy, which are available. I don't know if there are a lot available on Trailhead, because Trailhead normally cater more specific items related to Salesforce. And Agile or Scrum is not just for Salesforce, it's like overall software development lifecycle. So any developer, regardless of what area of expertise they have, either Salesforce or custom development or whatever, they need to get these Agile certifications. So probably Osama might be a good resource. And if I find some resources at data point, I will also share it via email to you and other. But I would highly recommend to get some of these certifications. Now I come to a point where, why do I bring that in this session, right? So again, at the end of it, all of these sessions, what I'm conducting, there is one very specific goal for these sessions. If you are new and you don't have a job in Salesforce, maybe you're still working, but you want to get a job in Salesforce, how you can actually land a job in Salesforce. So that's a one specific area or a specific target. Or if you're already in Salesforce ecosystem, how do you can progress to the next level? So very specific, all of these trainings are helping you, enabling you, providing you information that what are the next few steps that you can envision for yourself, make your milestones, and then just start working on them one by one. And at the end of achieving a couple of these milestones, they will open up different opportunities for you to either become and land a job in Salesforce. That could be your first job or internship, or you can able to, if you're already a Salesforce consultant, maybe that will help you to progress in your Salesforce journey. So for example, if you may be a junior developer, how to become a senior developer. If you're a senior developer, how you can become an architect. If you're an architect, how you can become like a delivery lead or something of that nature. So there are multiple ways how you can achieve that. And each of these sessions that I'm organizing based on my personal experience and the experience that I have seen from other peers of mine and other folks who are actually doing really, really well. I'm just bringing all those different components and milestones and just laying out over here so that you can, based on your background and based on your journey, wherever, which part of the journey you are at, you can pick up those items and then you can move forward. So bringing the Agile for this session, the reason for that is, again, you could be a new person trying to get into Salesforce, or again, you are somebody who's already in the Salesforce journey. Now, you already discussed that in my previous two sessions, and in the last previous session, more explicitly, was based on how to achieve like a Salesforce knowledge, right? So we talked about Salesforce Trailhead, right? You can go in there, learn Salesforce, different clouds from Trailhead. That's obviously comes for free. Now, there are a couple of other very nice courses available in Udemy, like Mike Wheeler is one of a very famous person in YouTube and provide a lot of really good courses. Focus on Force is another very, very informative website. You can go there. Both of these can charge very minimal, couple of bucks each course, but they are very helpful. And if you can use these courses along with the Trailhead is more, you can learn from say Trailhead and you can practice on Trailhead, but sometimes you have just too much information on Trailhead, which will also cause either you end up spending too much time, or you may get confused and convoluted that, okay, which one should I do? And after working months and months and months, you don't find yourself getting any specific results. So if you take some of these courses like Focus on Force or Mike Wheeler, or even you can go like some free, I share a couple of free YouTube channels from where you can learn more specific courses. So for example, in the beginning, if you're starting, you should go, the first training you need to go regardless of any questions is Salesforce Admin 201. I very explicitly explained in my last session, what does it mean? Because every time people heard about admin, they think that this is for administrators, and which is, again, it's a very big challenge for somebody like us to explain again and again that this is not for admin, this is Salesforce 101 training. So regardless of whatever you want to do in Salesforce, this training, you need to have it must. Even though you want to become a project manager, you want to become a business analyst, you want to become a developer, you want to become an architect, you want to become a data developer, whatever you want to become in Salesforce, Salesforce Admin 201 is the first entry-level certification that you should go through. Once you have that, then based upon your interest, you can start picking up your path. And I'll share some of more specific details, but basically then you can start looking into either as a consultant route, which is you can go for Sales Cloud Consulting certification, Service Cloud Consulting certification, and there are like tons of different clouds that you can do, but Sales Service, NPSP, and Experience Cloud. These are three or four main clouds that you can start off, provide you all the basic knowledge, and you can get 3 or 4 certifications just like that. Or you can acquire a couple of more technical certifications as well. They're also pretty easy once you're able to understand the certification process through Admin 201, which may take a little bit longer to start off to get certified. But once you complete your cycle with the first certification, then you're good to go. So which means that you have like a whole set of different certifications that you are doing for Salesforce. And along with getting a lot of these scores on Trailhead, I would recommend go for Salesforce actual certification. So if you have one, try to get two. If you have two, try to get four. If you have four, try to get eight. As many certifications as you have, this will at least show you and make you a little bit better on paper, on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, everywhere else. Because whenever you are presented to somebody, if I'm checking your profile for the very first time, and if I see that you have 10x certifications without knowing how much you know, without knowing how good or bad you are, without knowing anything, the first impression that will leave me is, oh, wow, this person has 10x certifications. You may have hacked those certifications, right? We all know that there are ways that a lot of people can get these certifications and they may have very minimal knowledge. I can totally understand that. But because if you are getting into an environment, you need some sort of edge to get in there, do something. So there's no harm in getting whatever you need to get to present yourself as best as you can. Obviously, if you want to sustain in the system, then you need to know that, because those certifications can maybe let you get a job, but that won't help you retain that job. So there are obviously different phases of job as well. You need to get a job, then you also need to retain a job. So if I have 10x certifications, and if I did a really good on interview, I may able to get a really good job. But how about if I don't have the enough knowledge that supports those 10x certifications? Because both based on those 10x certifications, the type of work assignment that I will get, that will be on a very equivalent level. And if I don't able to actually produce the results what I've been expected, I may not able to retain my job. So keep in mind that scoring job is not the only thing, but also maintaining a job is challenging as well. And again, if you have a knowledge and if you have the certifications, that will be like the best combination. So just wrapping up the topic, that you have a lot of certifications that are more technical in nature, which are Salesforce. Now, in order for you to become a little bit more prominent and show that you are sort of an all-rounder, you can also start getting one or two or three, as many certifications as you can get, which are more sort of supporting certifications, which we are talking about today, which is Agile or Scrum certifications. And these certifications are most of the time offered over the weekend. So there are like one or two or three classes, which are normally can be on weekdays or weekends, just 2 or 3 sessions. You can go through 3 sessions, go through the exam, and you will get certified in no time. Literally over a weekend, you can become like a Scrum Master or Agile practitioner, or there are a couple of other Agile and Scrum certification you can get. Now that will show on your resume you make it a little bit more prominent from other participants. If let's say if I'm checking 10 resumes and none of them have any other certifications, but you have couple of Salesforce certifications. On top of that, you have a couple of other supporting certifications. Obviously, I would be very interested in having a quick session with you to understand your expertise, because your resume looks very prominent, looks very good, showing that you are an all-rounder. Not only Salesforce side of the house, but you also know how to implement the things, and how does this whole process works, and what does Agile mean. And once you know Agile, then start going into more detail that how this Agile process works, because in Agile, there's a whole set of different requirements, which I will try to cover in the next 20 minutes. But let me take a quick pause and see if you guys have any questions, or if you want to add any comment over here before I continue into a little bit of actually how does an Agile or a Scrum or a sprint looks like.
So I wanted to ask, I know Agile is the method that is recommended in Salesforce.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you explained at the beginning to say maybe you have 10 features that you want to deploy, then you can do 1 feature per month. So I'm imagining a situation where maybe you have deployed the first, the second, and the third. Then you deploy the fourth, and then something breaks. Maybe from, maybe your fourth deployment affects maybe the first or the second. Then you go back to fix whatever the problem is. Does it not affect the time compared to doing it like the traditional way, where you provide the whole thing tested and everything is working at once?
Got it. No, very good question. So let's say if you are building in different steps, like feature by feature, And after the third feature, when you go into the fourth feature, is break something. Because it will, and you are absolutely correct that it may break something, but even when you are building the whole solution together, obviously you don't build everything in parallel. You are kind of building it sequentially. The only difference is at this point in time, you are kind of showing off to the client, letting them use it, doing the UAT piece. So you are affirming that this is exactly what they need. Otherwise, even if I'm doing the same process in a waterfall and I'm not, what exactly I'm not doing is I'm taking off the demo piece, I'm taking off the UAT piece, and I'm taking off the deployment piece, which means that I'm just developing something on my own as a team, as a partner, and my understanding that, yeah, this looks good. And I keep building different features. And at the end of 10 features, I show a demo. And when I show a demo, client is like, oh, this is not exactly this is not what I expected. This should work in a very different manner, because this is the first time when they're actually able to see the feature, try the feature, play around with it, and they have like ton of changes. So at that point in time, now you don't need to just fix one or two features. You may need to go back and fix all 10 features. Versus when you're doing piece by piece, when you develop the first feature, you give an opportunity to the customer to view it, test it, approve it. And then you go to the next feature, to the third feature. Now, when you say it's just something broke or something, some small things happen, that's a very normal thing. We can always fix that. It's not a big deal. But the challenge is, for example, if you build a feature and client says, this is not how I envisioned it, this is not the functionality, should not work like that. That's a bigger problem, because now you may need to build the whole feature again. And whenever we are giving these timelines, we do put buffers on different stages, because we do understand that you may get feedback and you actually allocate the time for the feedback. So we are not assuming that when we do a presentation of the first feature, approve it, UAT, we move to the fifth feature, there is no changes on the first one. There is always a small window where we allow changes based on the scope, which means that when we sign up the project, when we give the proposal, if you remember on the first step, which is mostly like a pre-sales, we also provide a list of scope items that we have agreed with the customer that it's gonna cost you 1,000 hours, but it's gonna give you these features. Now, if a client have any suggestions or something within the scope of the project, and maybe it's not working properly, we already allocated time and we can able to fix that. But if the client is saying this feature should not work like this, how defined in the scope, but it should work in a different manner, which is out of the scope, right? Then we can always show that to the client, saying that, hey, client, this is what we agreed upon. What you're asking is can be done, no problem. However, it will take us more time and more amount to be done. And this is called a change request process, which means that we agreed upon 1,000 hours, we agreed upon 10 months, and let's say in the middle of the project, the client come back with a requirement and they said, this is very kind of necessary, urgent, we need this change, and it was not part of the initial scope. And let's say that change or that new requirement that the client has come back, it may require additional 500 hours. So what we normally do, first of all, we review this change with the client to understand if this is part of the initial scope or not. Let's say if it is not part of the initial scope, and obviously we don't have allocated time for that, we will let the customer know, and obviously they have signed off on a contract as well, that this is not part of our initial scope. And do you still want us to give you a change request? Then we work internally. Same thing, same process that we did on initial step, which is like a proposal process. We go through the proposal and we come back that, hey, this is change request 1, will cost you another 500 hours and it will take another 2 months. If the client is agreed to that, they sign off, they give us 2 extra months, they give us 500 extra hours, and then we will proceed the project instead of 10 months into 12 months. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Very good. So perfect. So with that, we can start moving towards, just to give you like a very high level example of what that agile process or sprint look like, right? So what we do is typically when we are getting into the implementation phase after the requirements, we divide our project into sprints. A sprint is like, like a small set of timeline that we fix. During that one sprint, we'll try to implement a feature or a number of feature, and then we try to demo that feature at the end of the sprint. So let's say the last day of the sprint, and then if that feature needs to be deployed, we can also deploy on the last day of the sprint. Typically, the sprint itself is like a timeline. So I would say majority of the time, the sprint is of 2 weeks. So 10 working days or 14 days, including the weekends. 10 working days, 2 weeks is a typical sprint size. However, based upon your project or internal things, you can have 3 weeks sprint, you can have 4 week sprint, you can have 1 week sprint. Again, nobody is obviously your internal process will drive, but technically, if somebody asks you how long should be a sprint, so technically, in majority of the cases, it should be 2 week sprint. What will happen in a sprint? Before the sprint start, there will be a sprint planning session, right? Which means that we plan the sprint. Based upon the number of resources you have available that will work on a sprint, meaning that you may have developers, you may have configuration consultants, you will have QAs, and any other type of developers like architects and stuff. So you may have all of those. So based on your availability, you will basically have a set of requirements that you already collected from the client that you will get into the sprint planning meeting. And let's say you have a good, healthy backlog. Again, we'll come back to the backlog at later stage. I'm just trying to give you like a actual view, how is it working out, and then we can backtrack and talk about each of these items separately. But let's say you already go through all the requirements, you created all the stories. We'll talk about the stories and Epic if we get a chance today, or I'll continue in the next session. So basically, Epic is something like a big feature, and stories is actually how would you do that. So for example, if you want to let's say create a functionality where a customer can input their information and then you collect their information and create a new record. Let's say that's a feature. So we will call that feature as customer input form as an Epic. And within that, we can create multiple stories, which means that, okay, create an object, that's one story. Create fields, that's another story. Create this automation, another story. Create this this add-on functionality or something of that nature. So you can create all of that, and then you can create each of them will come with their own QA. So the tester will test each story. The developer will do its unit testing and move the ticket to the tester. And then at the end of the sprint, whole of this functionality will be demoed to the client. They will see it, they will provide the feedback. And if everything goes well, they can either deploy it or they will say, okay, this looks good, let's move on to the next feature. And then in some cases, they deploy multiple features together, let's say end of the month, end of the quarter, whatever the cycle is, but this is how a typical process gonna work. So what I was telling you is, let's say if you have a good set of all of these stories, you get into the sprint planning, which means that your Scrum Master, which I just mentioned you, that Scrum Master is a person who runs these activities or these different events that are happening, which means that you will have like a backlog grooming sessions, which is prior to sprint planning. Then you have a sprint planning session where you have all of the stories. You come up with how long will each story will take. And typically what we do is we will have a common consensus. So for example, the Scrum Master bring up the first story. He will read out the story. Typically the story is written by the like a BA, which is business analyst. And he provide all the high level information, what is needed, what is the acceptance criteria of the story, what is the description, what is the output customer is looking for, X, Y, Z. And then they will say to the team that what do you think it will take in terms of the complexity and number of hours, meaning that in some cases, it will only take 4 hours for the story to finish, but it's a very complex idea. So you need maybe a senior developer to look into that, because although it's like a small task in terms of number of hours, but it's very complicated. So there is like a pointing system, which goes like 1, 3, 5, 8, I guess 16, 24. So each of the point represent a certain number of hours. Typically, again, it is variable, but point most of the time represent 4 hours. Then you have 3-pointer represent 8 hours. So like a full day of work for a developer, and then you move on from there 5-pointer, I believe 8-pointer, and so on and so forth. So we will try to keep our storage as small as possible. So we can try to keep it like 1-pointers, maybe 3-pointers, maximum 5-pointers. We'll try not to go beyond that because then it means it's a really big story. So we'll try to chop it down into a smaller story so it's more digestible, more easy to distribute among the team, and so on and so forth. So in short, in the sprint planning session, you basically bring up each story, and then you ask the team that, okay, how complex is that? How long would you guys take? It will take. So let's say majority says it will take like 4 hours. Then you point that story accordingly, 1-pointer, and then you can say, okay, you can either assign it right there, or you can just put it in the sprint, and then based on your internal process, in some cases in sprint planning, you assign the stories to a specific developers, or you can just put them in your sprint, and then developers themselves, they can just pick up the stories based upon their schedule and then start working on those stories. But based on your capacity, based upon how many hours do you have for development, how many hours do you have for QA, based upon your team and availability, because sprint planning, you also ask who is working, do you have any days off, and things like that. So you have like a tentative number of hours that the team have for certain tasks. So for example, for development, for testing, for deployment. So you know that this sprint have this much capacity for development, and based on that, they will assign X number of stories into a sprint, and then either assign directly to the developers in the sprint planning, or they can just come up, start picking up the stories, and then move on from there. But the goal is that before the end of the sprint, all of these stories should be done, completed, tested, QA tested, ready for demo, and so on and so forth. And then you have a process called stand up, which is every single day during the sprint process of 10 working days, the Scrum Master will conduct a short meeting, technically it's 30-minute meeting, where 15 minutes, technically half of the meeting is for getting a high-level information, which is, as the name suggests, called stand up, which is technically you have this meeting where you can all stand up in your room. I mean, right now, most of the time we are working remotely, but the name still says stand up. So you can stand up where you can walk around, you can basically talk to each consultant in a very quick manner, less than a minute or two, just tell them their updates, what they have done in the past, like yesterday, what they're planning to do today, and if they have any impediments or any issues that they have. So very high level, they will tell you, and then if they want to discuss a little bit more, they will wait till you get to the next session, which is the last 15 minutes, where you can discuss some specific problems in more detail. So on a high level, this is like an everyday activity. In that way, if maybe somebody asks that if you assign like 50 hours for this week, how do you know that if they are done? Because every day you are following up on that. And this is the job of Scrum Master, to maintain the capacity, to assign enough tasks so that everybody has work. So if you assign 2 less tasks, then people have more time and they don't have any tasks to do. Or if you assign too many tasks, they may not able to finish, and then you are just moving stories from one sprint to another. So again, I know I have covered kind of agile process from a very high level. I know Osama is here, and he's ready to take charge. But hopefully this high level of just a basic understanding can help you. I believe we may need more sessions, and again, Sama can probably help you to understand a little bit more stepwise that how this process works, what are the terminologies, things of that nature. But we will have more sessions in future. We will talk about all of these, maybe independently, like what is the grooming, like what is the story grooming means, what is the actual sprint planning means, what is the actual sprint different processes entail, how to write a story, how to view a story, how to work on the task, how do you know how long would it take, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of different components to it, but hopefully that can give you a very high level understanding of how a day-to-day life in a Scrum environment will feels like. So with that, I will hand it over to Osama, and he will take it from here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Khurram. And happy to be with you, everyone. I just want to make sure, sound check, Everything okay? Are you able to
Yep.
hear me? All right,
Yep.
wonderful.
You are loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. And let me go ahead and also share my screen and make sure that you're able to see that. So, all right. You're able to see my screen?
Yep, we
Yes.
can. Good to go.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so just picking up from what Khurram was saying, we are going to have kind of an introduction to Agile. There may be some overlap with what he had just mentioned. It helps to kind of lay the foundation. So bear with us as we kind of build things. This is a big topic and it could take um, more sessions, and I'm gonna be sharing some resources and such. So as we go through this, um, feel free to jump in and ask questions and um, see how we can point you to the right direction. So this is actually relevant to you. So in terms of the agenda, we want to start with an introduction to Agile, introduction to Scrum, and Scrum already covered few great events that happen within that. How to enter into the Agile field as you're interested in this, what tracks can you take, and what are the available certificates. So just a little bit about me. We I started in Agile in 2009, and it was really early. Um, was still kind of Agile. It was not very much known, and I remember at the time there was always kind of like what is Agile versus what is waterfall, etc. I was fortunate to be mentored by some of the Agile thought leaders. I briefly worked with one of the people who signed the Agile Manifesto. Um, and currently, I am at Salesforce, and I in the process of training hundreds of people along with other instructors on Agile. I am a proud father of a 7-year-old girl. And for some of the companies that I've worked for in terms of Agile consulting, these are some of the companies. Um, so been around the block, still learning. This is a big field and a lot of things are developing, a lot of things are learning. So I'm in the learning process myself, but happy to kind of impart where um, I have the knowledge that I've gained over the years. So starting with Agile from a really high level, from a really high level, Agile came as a response for project management processes that are very, very heavy. So some of you may be familiar with the PMP, Project Management Professional certificate. And you know that it covers a lot of areas. And some projects are really big that they require a lot of control processes and just a lot of layers. And so it can get quite complicated. If you approach every project with the same mindset, then what you end up going to have is very, very heavy process where you're basically focusing a lot on each of the event and each of the document that you're producing rather than focusing on the end goal. So here we're too busy exploring the rock versus with agility is let's go ahead and reduce the noise and focus on getting to the top. That's essentially what Agile is. I love this video, and I'm going to go ahead and share my sound. Um, once it starts, if you can just tell me if you're able to hear the sound. Okay, it's not actually playing. All right. in that case, we can go ahead and skip that video. I can play it in from its source. Yeah.
If you
Go
have
ahead.
a YouTube
Yes, I'll
link, you
play
can
it.
just play it from there.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try this one. Yeah, it's not playing. So I can go ahead and continue without it. And as it comes up again in the presentation where it's relevant, I can go ahead and play that one. All right. So, but essentially what I was going to show is some of the dysfunction that you may have when it comes to the communication layers that you have within a company. So that's what essentially the video is showing. Um, that there are times when you have to keep reporting to multiple people, and those reports do not make sense. But we're doing it for the sake of the process. This is what we believe is right from a process standpoint, and everyone has to adhere to it, regardless of the context, regardless of what is actually needed to get us to a point where we're delivering efficiently. So Agile, just to give you a little bit of the history of it, um, in the 80s and the 90s, you have a lot of push towards processes becoming very prescriptive. Every aspect needs to be laid out. Every process needs to be prescribed on the folks on the team, and we have to adhere to all of these different processes. And so you see in the software development world, a lot of teams started experimenting with lightweight methods. So what they're doing is, let's come together as a team and let's just try to focus on the software that we're building. And as they're doing it, they're experimenting with their own processes. So in 2001, a group of 17 software developers and very smart folks who are kind of from the system engineering background, they came together near Salt Lake City. And they started talking about what can we do to improve the processes in the software development world. And after a weekend of a lot of discussions and talks and perhaps a lot of fun, and maybe they went skiing, God knows what they did, they came up with this manifesto. Basically, what they said is, we value certain items over others. So we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We value working product over comprehensive documentation. We value customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And we value responding to change over following a plan. These are the things that we value the most. They say, not that we don't value the items here, is that we value these items more. Okay, let me start to give you some examples of what we're talking about here. When they're saying individuals' interactions over processes and tools, we've all seen processes where I have to go through sign off from my lead and from my manager before I can release something to the main branch when it comes to the coding. Or I have produced some documents and the review process is going to take 2 weeks before it's released. So what they're saying here is that we want to make sure to empower individuals to do the work, to foster their interaction, to provide them with the right tools that will help them to do this, to provide them with the right processes to help them do this. But if we have some processes or tools that are not helping the people, get rid of them. Because the main reason why we have a tool like Jira, like even Salesforce, if we're not the Salesforce implementers, if we're, for example, we're doing Salesforce for a client, and the client doesn't need some certain features, and if those features are making their interaction with it heavy, then there's no need to have them go through this experience just because, well, this is what we would like for you to have, right? We want to make sure that we give people what they need to do the work. And this here, when they say working product over comprehensive documentation, is that in large projects, you do need a lot of documentation. Just because when you have a large project, 200 people are involved in it, there is a lot of things going on. So you need to have processes, you need to have documentation. But look into the documentation and see if there's something that is valuable, keep them. If not, get rid of them. And I do remember I was working on a project for Medicare. And for those of you who are not from the US, this is kind of a national healthcare system for senior people. And so we were working on the project to upgrade the website, and it was a big project. And I was tasked at the time to maintain a 500-page requirements document. A 500-page requirements document. Here's what's interesting is that after 2 or 3 months of working on it and maintaining it, I remembered my lead was sitting down and he's saying that we really need to kind of look into our documentation and try to make things a bit more efficient and valuable for the customers. So he's like, so for example, the business requirements document um, is yes, so the same 500 pages. I actually used to open it in Word, and then I would just get up, make some tea, walk around, and then come back by the time it actually opens up. So when I export it to PDF, it wasn't as heavy, of course. Like PDF can handle this, but I needed to maintain it in Word first. So, um, and so he said that it's like, for example, the client doesn't really read the business requirement document. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, it's way too heavy. It's just too much going on. So I'm like, so why are we doing it? There's no contractual obligations. And I remember like having one of those existential crises. Like, why am I here? Like, what is my purpose of in life? Why do I even exist as a person, as a professional, right? It's like one of those moments. So what Agile is saying, focus on what actually provides value, right? Which is at the end of the day, we're trying to make to give a working product to our customers. And here, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Of course, we need contracts, but we want to make sure to build a relationship based on trust with the client so that we can make things happen. But if we keep going back to a contract that says, well, we wanted to deliver for you this thing in Marketing Cloud, and this thing no longer makes sense. So if it still makes sense, of course, and if the contract says that, right? If it no longer makes sense, then we still have to deliver it just because the contract said it. That we want to change that attitude, right? He said like have trust as the main value, right? And the contract reflects that type of relationship with the client, so that when things change, you're able to kind of change with the market. And this is where it gets us to responding to change over following a plan. Um, we're going to see in a bit that actually Agile has a lot of planning. Um, so planning is important, but we want to make sure that we're able to also respond to the market. The market is always dynamic. Things are always moving. So the four values that the wrote in 2001 have become kind of cornerstone in terms of what we call agility, right? So if we step a little bit outside of what is agile that I'm talking about, right? You're gonna see that these things, they just make sense. They're common sense, right? But they are a response to a direction that the industry was going towards, and they're trying to correct the path, right? Uh, they also talked about 12 different principles. I'm not going to go through them, but again, as you see here, a lot of things that make sense. Customer satisfaction, face-to-face communication, communicating regularly, deliver frequently, don't wait until the end to deliver. So all of these things are principles that they've also laid out to say, like, this is how we should go about in terms of building agility. Okay. Now, in terms of when we're talking agile, even before agile was a thing and people talked about it, you see a lot of agile teams. I'm trying here to get you to a point where you understand agility and making sure that you as a team is able to move with the changes and to adapt to the circumstances, right? So when you look at the early Apple work, it was pretty agile. I mean, that was like in the 70s, so that was way before the Agile manifesto. It's just in the garage, and the two Steves, Steve Jobs and Wozniak, they're sitting there thinking about the business strategy and the hardware that is required to build the Macintosh computer, etc. When you look at the early Facebook, so this is from the film about Facebook. Um, it's just people coming together and they're coding all together, and it's just, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of back and forth communication. As you can see here, face-to-face communication. All of these things exist, and they exist in a very natural way. So this is where you see a lot of agility in this one. However, um, if we want to move from the conceptual realm into something that actually we can utilize to run our work, then we need a framework. Okay, so if we say that agile is eyes on the prize, this is where I have the it's eyes on the prize, we need to have a framework that is able to put some limits, to be able to put some boundaries around this, and to make it structure. We need to have some structure, right? And so Scrum is one of those, and it's actually the most popular one. Now, before I proceed to talking about Scrum, let me take a pause here for a second to ask you about your experience with Scrum. Have you worked with it before? Is this all new to you? And if you've worked with it before, what is your understanding of it so far, your impression of it, and how it plays out in your professional work? So let me take a pause and hear from you. Feel free to come off mute or just kind of in the chat.
Any volunteers?
So let's kind of start easy in the chat. If you can, just from 1 to 5, rate for me your experience with Agile and Scrum. 1 being least familiar, and 5 being I'm been there, done that, seen it work or not work.
Okay, we got 1.
1. All right.
Couple of
So there's
ones.
2. All right. Okay. All right.
Well, I don't
So
know how to rate my experience because it's theoretical. I haven't really, so maybe it's a 0.
Okay. All new. That's fine. I guess that's the one. Yeah. I'm tuning to learn as much as I can about how the two work together. Okay. Yep. Very good. All right. Wonderful. So let's go ahead and talk about Scrum then. So Scrum is the most popular framework when we talk about Agile. And a lot of people, when they say Agile, what comes to mind right away is Scrum, right? What I'm doing here is trying to kind of separate the two. Agile is more the attitude, right? It's bringing in agility, right? Scrum is more the structure. This is how we actually can make things work in real life. So Scrum, in a sense, is saying, okay, we've had for a very long time a problem in software development world where we spend a huge time upfront analyzing the requirements, and then we build that, and then at the very end we go to the client and tell them, here's the work. Okay, so let's say it's a 1 year project in Salesforce. We spend about 3 months analyzing the requirements, what the client is asking for. We're spending 6 months working and building the solution, and then maybe 2 months um, at the end in terms of doing quality assurance. By the end of the month, we give things to the client. Now, if the market has not changed, and if we have truly understood what the client wanted, then if the client expects this in a year, then they get that at the end of the year. But most projects don't go this way. This is kind of an ideal situation, and very small percentage of projects go this way. In real world situations, what happens in most projects is that we actually don't understand all the requirements that are coming from the client. The client themselves may not actually know everything upfront. They're going to be discovering things with us. And as we build things, the market will change, and the client will start to change their mind as they get more input. So as they start to see the work getting built up, they're going to be coming up with different ideas. And the market's changing around them. So they're coming in. It's like, oh, well, this the other competitor, they put this dashboard, and I want to go ahead and add a dashboard to the project, right? And so things continue to change, especially as the project is longer. So if we're talking a 3 month project, sure, like this is in and out, but a longer project, things are bound to change. And so with Scrum, what it says, okay, let's go ahead and create a product backlog where we have a list of items that the client wishes to have. But we're not going to spend an exorbitant amount of time analyzing the whole thing. We're going to understand what the client wants from a high level. So instead of 3 months upfront, let's spend maybe 3 weeks trying to understand everything. Okay. And then we're going to take a sliver of this, a portion of this backlog, and then we're going to hammer it with the client. This is where we do like all of our analysis. We're going to go deep. We're going to go to the design of things. We're going to go to the technical background of all of it, how it's going to be done, right? But this is something very small. It's maybe 2 to 4 weeks. And then we actually go ahead and work on it and implement it. We show it to the client, who can potentially be able to like ship it, to actually give it to the end user if they want to, and give us feedback As we receive feedback from the client, we have some wiggle room to change things here because we didn't invest as much time upfront. We take a small portion, we hammer it, we build it, deliver it, get feedback, so on and so forth. This is Scrum in a nutshell. So it's going from kind of a construction project type of way to a more agile and software related type of process. Okay. Um, if you're familiar with building a house, you start with the blueprint, then you build the foundation, and then you're building the structure of the house. And at least in America, it's like it's done with wood. I know internationally, it could be done with bricks. And then as you start to kind of flesh things out, right? By the end of it, you have actually the house, right? And that's when you're able to give it to the client and say, okay, your house is ready. Um, so this is how software is built. So Scrum is saying no, like imagine that you building the house room by room. Like you're building the master bedroom, um, and then you're building the small bathroom attached to it, and you're telling the client you can go ahead and take a tour in it at this point, right? And then you're building the kitchen next to it and so on. So it's like building it modularly rather than building it from the bottom up. So that's what Scrum did. Um, uh, just to kind of like mention something that I mentioned before, the planning. Um, so traditionally, we would plan maybe for 3 months for a 1 year project, and then we start working. Here, we try to truncate it by, say half of this or less. So let's say 3 weeks or a month. But then a lot of planning happens throughout the whole project. So this is kind of the genius to Scrum, is that it's saying that we're not really doing less planning. There's a lot of planning still involved, but the upfront planning is less, and then you're basically kind of pushing a lot of that planning as you're building. You're planning and building, planning and building. So that's kind of the cyclical nature. In terms of how a Scrum team is structured, is that you have the team, the developers and the testers and so on. And then you have a Scrum Master, project manager. You have a product owner, usually from the client side. Okay. And the Scrum Master is the one kind of responsible for the process. The product owner is responsible for the product. And then you have the team who's actually implementing this product. Okay. So they've also kind of simplified how the team looks like. This is what we call a team topology. Okay, so they've simplified it. That doesn't mean that we don't have more roles. So you can be an architect, you can be a developer. As a developer, you can be a UI developer or other types of developer, Java developer, whatever. You still have the QA engineers and so on. But the basically said this is all together as a team, and then we have someone who's concentrating on the process, someone who's concentrating on the product. So this is kind of like how the typical Scrum team looks like. Now, before I kind of close off this part, Scrum is one of the frameworks that take the Agile values and put it in a structured way, but is not the only one. So you may hear something called Kanban. Kanban actually comes from Lean. And for those of you who are familiar with Lean or Six Sigma, right? My black belts here. Uh, if you're familiar with it, it actually comes from the manufacturing world, from Toyota. And this is like, it goes all the way back to the 40s. So this is not new. This is like old established tried and true stuff, right? And um and basically Kanban is built on this concept where how can we get something from point A to point B efficiently, the fastest amount possible. So that's kind of like when you have manufacturing, is basically how can we get a car from its components all the way to an actual car that we can deliver to the customers, right? So that's what Kanban is. So it still adheres to the Agile value, but it's a different process, it's a different structure. Scaled Agile has been making the rounds. I'm going to talk a lot about it in a second. This is kind of like, okay, we talked about at the team level, but what will happen as we start to try to build a team of teams where it's not just 5, 6 people working on one project, but this is just one team out of 5 other teams. How are we going to be able to scale this, right? How about if we want to have at the portfolio level, where we have actually uh, um, 20, 30, 50 teams working across multiple products, right? How about at an organizational level? How do we bring in this level of agility at an organizational level? The higher up you go in terms of scaling, the more complex your reality is going to be, and the more challenges that you will face, right? And the less flexibility and agility that you're going to have. So how can we bring in the most agility in these very um, highly structured levels of the organization? So that's what scaled agile is more concerned about, right? So we have multiple frameworks um, tackling different areas, and different teams, they may employ different types of frameworks depending on their situation. They may even come up with their own version, so they take something and they customize it. And these are not even the only frameworks out there. Um, but I'm just kind of keeping it simple for everyone. I don't want to inundate you with too much information. But those are very important. Scrum, Kanban, and now very recently scaled Agile or Safe. Okay, I have a question here. Does Kanban allow us to take a look at the big picture? And is it possible to use both Kanban and Scrum at the same time? So if you're talking by the big picture at the team level, yes, Kanban allows for that because it actually provides a way to visualize the work. So if you're familiar with Kanban board, and I hope that at this point most of you are, let me go ahead and show you Kanban board. I mean, I have it here in the icon, but I just want to make sure that you see it. Board. I'm just getting you a picture of it. All right. So here, um, you probably at this point quite familiar. This is the most basic one: to do, doing, done. And of course, different teams, they start to yeah, there it is. They start to customize it based on what they need. So they may have, the in analysis phase, planning, overdue, verify, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's kind of Kanban. So yes, so Kanban is actually quite powerful. And when people do Scrum, they cannot live without a Kanban board. Um, right. Does this answer your question? Yes, it does. Okay, excellent. All right. Okay. So, any other questions before I kind of like move to, okay, how do we actually enter the agile field and such? This is the interesting part about careers and okay. All right. So, entering the agile field. it's going to be basically, it comes down to experience and education. Like, if you want to experience Agile, if you're early in your career, and I don't know the composition of everyone in the call, so forgive me for that. If you're early in your career, internships, of course. If you're more established, look for teams in the company that do Agile, um, and try to kind of get their experience. Maybe if you're able to move to that team, that's how you're going to be able to learn. Um, if you're not able to, then at least just have conversations, build some relationship network with folks within your company who have um, this process already running, and talk to them about their experience, and what's happening in their teams, how they enter the field, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it comes from building that experience. From an educational standpoint, um, certificates, and we're going to be talking about certificates. So that's an excellent way to enter into the field, and there's a plethora of certificates, and I'm going to try to kind of demystify this whole roadmap for you. But having Agile communities, meetups. If you go to Meetup, um, .com and search for Agile, you'll probably find Agile community of practice that meet on a weekly or monthly basis. Join them on LinkedIn groups. Um, uh, just make sure that you align with folks, just like you did today, like when you saw the Agile announcement, and perhaps you're regular, you come every time, but if you're coming for Agile specifically, then you're basically um, kind of putting this to practice, right? So Agile communities, and I definitely can help you with kind of pinpoint you to some places where you can search for an Agile community that's kind of local to you or so on. But we're going to be kind of discussing the certificates because that's the big one. Um, and it gives you credentials. It gives you a lot of exposure. You start to build also some network with the instructor who comes from the Agile world and people who are coming in, and you can kind of take that journey together. So there are three tracks. There is process, product, and technical. Okay, process, product, and technical. Now, in terms of process, this is where you will see people like Scrum Masters, and if you heard Agile coaches, right? So this is these are different roles, okay? But at least if you've heard of these roles before, so those are people who are focused on the process. Product, um, those are the folks who focus on making sure that the the product has a vision, that we're breaking down the product into user stories, and Khurram already kind of touched on this, breaking things down. So there's an art to it. There's a kind of a science to it, and this is the work of product owner, product manager. And then we have the technical track, which that's when you start to get into uh, be a software engineer, in the Agile sense, um, and DevOps engineer. This is also the where you see that this type of role in this track, right? So it depends on what you're looking for. Are you a more technically oriented person, or are you more into the business side of things? If you're more on the business side of things, then maybe you want to look at the product or the process. If you're more on the technical side, then you're looking at the technical. Okay. What is the search for product owner manager? Any prerequisites for this? Yes, we're just about to get into it. So let me go ahead and actually go to that slide. All right. So we have multiple certifying bodies that provide all of these credentials. The most established, the most recognized, the most reputable at this point are these three. Others exist? Yes. Are they reputable? Yes. Well, depends. I can definitely like answer specific questions if you ask me about, Kanban University, or you're asking me about the um, Scrum Master certificate, SMC rather than the CSM. So like there are folks who are trying to kind of like enter into this field, and it's not a good certifying body. And their other certifying bodies are very solid, they're good, but they just don't have the same name recognition. If we're talking about name recognition, so it helps you with your career, as well as reputable one, that will help you in terms of the learning, these three are kind of the biggest. I would say the two on the left, Scaled Agile and Scrum Alliance, um, they kind of they're more on the name recognition side. Okay. And Skilled Agile has been very, very um, strong as of late, especially in an area where you have a lot of government work or a lot of big organizations. Um, uh, Skilled Agile is making the rounds. It's getting to a point now where it's becoming the standard, right? So let's kind of like look at the various tracks, and I added here foundation. So this is not a kind of, it's not a track. It's just basically foundational knowledge, right? Um, so this is where you will see a leading safe certificate, okay? And on the IC Agile side, the Agile fundamentals. So I always recommend that you start with these types of certificates, depending on which one you're gonna go with. Um, it just helps lay the foundation and understand what Agile is and the various frameworks from a leading safe or the safe perspective. It also helps you understand safe itself, scaled Agile. And again, just as a reminder, um, what I said earlier, what scaled Agile is that we have to think of Agile not just at the team level. There's team, there's program or team of teams, there is portfolio. So these are multiple products, and we're all kind of like coming together as a business unit or as strategic portfolio together, right? And then at the business agility. So this is a big company with so many things going on. How do we bring in this agility that we talked about in a highly structured environment, right? And that's why safe is becoming popular with these big companies, because it's like it's answering a lot of the questions that we have, or at least it's addressing the challenges that we're facing, right? So leading safe, it provides you with that understanding of how do we scale things, right? Um, I see Agile fundamentals. I recommend more if you're not gonna get too much into the scaling part. I recommend it also from a learning perspective. I think the leading safe one is a little bit heavy. So if you're already familiar with Agile, if you're the type of person who's good at like kind of system thinking, so this is a really solid certificate for you. But if you're just trying to get to just get an understanding of Agile, just trying to get started with it, and don't talk to me about all of these big things, then I would recommend the IC Agile certificate. Um, yeah. Uh, in terms of the process, you have Safe Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Master. Now, Certified Scrum Master, this is like the origin of this whole thing. I mean, at some point, this was the holy grail of Agile. If you become a certified Scrum Master, you're going out there and you're gonna make some noise. You're gonna get a new job. You're probably gonna get, a promotion, or your pay is gonna be upped a little bit. And yeah, so like it's CSM, Certified Scrum Master. This was the golden thing, and this is one of the earliest it's the first certificate that I got in 2009. At this point, it's still recognizable, still kind of the most recognized credential when you put your name. So let's say I see Lillian Moyo, okay? So Lillian Moyo, and then comma CSM, right? So it still has, you know, this kind of name recognition. But now there are other certificates out there. So the Safe Scrum Master is there. So long as you have a certificate as a Scrum Master, you're good to go from that standpoint. Agile Team Facilitator is also a solid one from IC Agile. Although this is more doesn't have the same name recognition, and it's really more about how to be a successful facilitator. And I think this is the most powerful one from that standpoint. Is when you have a team, how do I really make things work? How the dynamics of it. So I recommend this for those who like from a knowledge perspective, but from a name recognition perspective, it's one of those two. Um, the product owner, product manager. Someone asked me about this. You can do either certified product owner from Alliance, but now Safe is it has very solid certificate here. So if you're already going in the Safe track, then you can just just take this one. So I would recommend these two then, leading Safe and the product owner if you're product oriented. Agile product ownership is good one from IC Agile as well. Um, and then on the technical track, there's a lot actually in the technical one. I just chose the Agile software engineer from Safe, the Scrum developer from Scrum Alliance, and the Agile programming. But there are more. There's like, for example, Safe it provides Safe Architect. Um, from IC Agile, there is, yeah, there's also architecture, DevOps. So if you want to go more into DevOps, if you've never heard this, don't worry about it. I don't need to explain it right now, but it's just as a technical person, if that's what you're interested in, there's a lot more certificates at this point when it comes to the technical track, right? But here I've tried to simplify the whole mess out there and trying to kind of give you very simple view, simple roadmap if you're trying to get started with the certificate. And I actually teach these courses. So the Agile Fundamentals, Agile Team Facilitator, Leading Safe, Safe Scrum Master, and I'm working on becoming a trainer for the Safe Product Owner, Product Manager. Should get there very soon. So uh, I'm certified trained in those certificates, and definitely happy to put together a training if there's some interest from you guys. Most of my training right now is in Salesforce. So every month or every 2 weeks, we put together one of those courses, and it's more on the safe side in Salesforce, and we train like 50 people in one go, right? Every class is like 30, 40, 50 people. So yeah, we have an amazing, well-oiled machine at Salesforce for certifying people. And I do on the side as well, for those who are wishing to take these certificates. What would you recommend between a general project management certification or specializing in Agile for Salesforce career, that is? If you are looking to have a more agile um, a more agile niche, then I would say just take either Leading Safe or the Agile Fundamentals. So you have a good understanding of Agile, as well as a certificate to show that you have gone through the learning process. And then the rest of the work is going to be more on the Salesforce certificate side. So you may not need to keep going through the other certificates in Agile itself, because the fundamentals for you is what you are seeking. Okay. Now, if you're planning on going the Agile route, whether it's Salesforce or outside of Salesforce, any company for that matter, then that's you gotta decide in your track. Are you a process, a product, or a technical person? And then you gotta look at the which certificates that you want to take. So I'm giving you a lot of options here, and I know sometimes too many options is not a good thing, but this is as simplified as I am able to get it. Um, Take the certificates that you need, and then you can specialize more in an agile track. Yeah, but for a career, in the Salesforce ecosystem, whether at the company itself, Salesforce, or the whole ecosystem, the Salesforce implementers and consultants and so on, you may just need a fundamentals certificate. Hopefully that answers your question.
Just to add to that,
Mhm.
one thing which I noticed from my experience is I know there are a lot of folks who are trying to get into Salesforce, right? And they're trying to show some additional credentials, what it looks like. So whatever here mentioned, like fundamentals, facilitator, or certified Scrum Master, they would be pretty awesome because maybe you can go to Agile fundamentals to start off, and then maybe you can jump to certified Scrum Master from Scrum Alliance that can give you very good in terms of resume proposition that what you can go for. And then once you get into like the field, I would say on an ongoing basis, then you can switch to scaled agile and then do a couple of certifications from there. So in that way, you can able to kind of utilize and have both different flavors in your resume, as well as if you are working in a company or organization where you can start off from scale agile, then maybe you can just do agile fundamentals just to get a basic idea and then switch to this is agile scale agile track. Right there you have a couple of certifications, you can do it. And to be very honest, these can be done in a very kind of a shorter span of
Yes.
time compared to something else. So maybe if we can talk a little bit about
Mhm.
how long would some of these take,
Mhm.
and that might be
Yes.
helpful for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of most of these classes, they're between 2 to 3 days. Um, when we used to run them face to face before COVID, most of these classes would just basically be coming in the morning, 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and go all the way to the afternoon. 5 o'clock, we 5, 6 o'clock we finish, and we just kind of hammer it in a weekend. If you want to do over a weekend, or in the middle of the weekday, it could be like a 3-day course or something. So it would be over a course of 3 days and you're done. By the time you finish, you basically gotten the certificate. Now, because a lot of these classes are run virtually at this point, we still need to have those 16 hours or 32 hours. And so you may end up having it in over a course of 4 days or a week because we shorten the meeting time because it's virtual. It's harder to concentrate for that long, you guys know. When it's virtual. It's still done very well. Over the course of the last 2 years, there has been tremendous work to bring in the learning value that we've had in a face-to-face interaction to the virtual world. So you still get a lot of the learning aspect, but it just maybe needs to be shortened a little bit. So it spans, expect to go like at least 3 days. Maybe not full days, but 3 days to 5 days for most of these courses. Again, depending on the instructor and depending on how it's run and so on. Um, the um, the let me go ahead and so when it comes to agile, scaled agile, there is an exam, and that exam needs studying. So just keep that in mind that when you finish the course, they actually give you like maybe a month um of a just like a time where you can study and take the exam. You don't need the whole month, of course. There are people who, after they finish the course, they just take the exam and they pass. But um, it, think of PMP, for example, a project management professional. Even if you go take a training, you still have to study a little bit. And so SAFe expects you to spend a little bit of time studying in order for you to get the exam. IC Agile, there's no exam in it. You can get the certificate once you're done, but we do ask you to to participate. So as instructors, we are instructed by IC Agile to take notes of how engaged people are. And people who are not engaged and they're not getting the information, they're not getting the material, then we try to help them out and try to get them engaged. And if it's just not working out, then we cannot give them out the certificate. So it's about your participation. Scrum Alliance is kind of somewhere in the middle. Um, you're expected to engage, and the instructor, is working with you to make sure that you're getting actually the information. There is an exam, however, it's not meant to be um, a heavy exam. So with Skilled Agile, the exam is an exam actually. um, so it does require some studying and some prep work and so on. So that's in terms of actually the how long the those courses take and such. In terms of in terms of the cost, if you're in the US side, I understand international is going to be different. In the US side, these courses, they're usually in the $1,000 range. Um, However, I can tell you, just being in this field for so long, because of competition, the more fundamental courses and Scrum Master and so on, they're getting cheaper because there's just so many trainers now and so many providers, and so the competition is driving the prices down. Um, and so you can take advantage of this. So like you're now seeing numbers within the 800s and the 700s, and even less if you're running. If some companies are running discounts, you see it even less than that. Now you're probably not going to see it any less than uh, um, 500-600 or something. I don't think I've seen anything less than this, and like those discounts or whatever. But I'm just trying to be as open and transparent with you as possible about the field and what's happening in it. Now, if you get to advanced courses, so for example, there's something called Advanced Scrum Master, right? If you get to the more engineering ones, if you get to architecture, right? So the more advanced you go, the less of a discount that you will find, because it's just less providers, and the people going for these ones are the ones who probably have gone through a few certificates already, and they're advanced in their career. They're really into this agile track, and so the demand versus supply um, just looks different. The dynamics just a little bit different. So this is where you'll see like 1,000+ still for these courses. But for the fundamental stuff, it's the range is, expect an average of 800, 700 to 800 on the US side, maybe a little bit less if you catch a discount, maybe a little bit more if you find an awesome trainer, and so on and so forth. Internationally, I don't know all the costs. It's definitely different in different places. Expect it to be, of course, it's not chump change. These are excellent certificates. The credentials are amazing. The amount of work that was put into each one of this is huge. The founder of IC Agile is a personal friend of mine, and I actually worked with him while he was establishing IC Agile. So I was working with him in a different company, and the idea came to him, and I actually helped out in the initial phases. So it's huge amount of work. So don't expect this to be like, let me just put in, 100, $200. It's definitely much more of a higher value item than that. So hopefully that kind of covers the logistics. If there are any questions, or Khurram, if you want to kind of jump in.
Yeah, I just want to add something to it. Is I know we did talk about the two key items that obviously even helpful for me as well, because it's been a while, is like the timeline and the cost. So the timeline, just to summarize, it looks like you can do it in 3 months, from 3 days to less than a month, which is pretty fast, right? So if you are really focused, within 3 days or less than a week, or maximum if you're super busy, within a 2 weeks, 3 weeks time frame, you can get your first certification, which is amazing, right? In terms of cost, I know he mentioned about different cost pricing. Sounds like anywhere from $500 to $1,000.
Mhm.
But think about the doors that will open for you. So the main thing right now, I hear from a lot of different consultants and who are trying to enter into Salesforce is we are not getting any interviews. How do we enter into Salesforce? How do we get a job? I have done this many trails, but I'm not getting anything. Nobody's even pursuing. So how do I get my foot in to begin with? So some of these certifications can add on to the value that you're providing, because right now, as I told you in some of my previous sessions, that the competition is tough now uh, because of all the recession and tech, the things going on with the tech itself over the past couple of months. So it is getting tough, and it will become super tough in the next year or so. So in order to get yourself prominent, these certifications, which are add-on from your Salesforce technical piece, will give you edge. And in most cases, I would still believe, again, if you're on US side, uh, definitely it's like a small piece of your first salary that you receive. So it's not even equivalent to your half salary that you get your first paycheck. Will cover not only these certifications, but also cover everything from your Salesforce certification site as well. So imagine that if you just spend like half of your monthly salary on this one, once you get a job, it's like a no-brainer in terms of cost. On the other side, if you actually, when you learn, you go your bachelor's or master's degree, regardless of the country, regardless of US or international, they cost a lot of money, a lot of time, and at the end of it, there's a very slim chances that you can just get jobs just virtue of that. You also need to go through the same challenges that you may have been going right now. So the main reason for bringing Osama here is to make sure that you guys can understand the value that these certifications can bring, and the end goal. The end goal, obviously, we have in mind is to progress in Salesforce, or also get into Salesforce. So yeah, pricing is something that people are a lot of time get uncomfortable. But again, if you are on a path to become a Salesforce consultant, want to make a ton of money, then it does require some investment, and also in not only investment from the time perspective, but also from monetary. But the payout is pretty pretty well, to be very honest. Even if you are international students, I don't think so it will take more than a few weeks worth of your pay to cover everything that you do, including not just a couple of these certifications, but also a couple of Salesforce certifications. If you buy some other exam questions or practice questions or whatever. So if you bucket everything, most of the time, I have never seen it more than 1 month of your salary. So imagine the first month you can cover everything, and after that onwards, your whole career, basically you're feeding off of it. So think of it, never always just go towards the free options and things like that, because if it is free, if it is something very low value, then it also doesn't give you an edge. You are looking for an edge, right? So if it is everything is free, everybody can do it across the board, then what is the value, right? Why, if you have this, um, if you have this certification, what is the value that you can bring in? So just to keep some of these things in mind. And again, as I said, I mean, even if you are in Salesforce ecosystem and you are working, but you want to grow and build your career on Salesforce, you also need some of these things, because as you heard, like scale agile, right? So now think about it. If you're working on a smaller projects, or an environment where just managing one or two projects, or working on one or two projects, and if you get some of these certifications, that will enhance your probability to end up finding a job in bigger organizations, bigger companies, or bigger end clients where you have multiple projects, or even on a bigger Salesforce partners who run like different clients on a portfolio level. So a lot of these things are pretty good. Hopefully, I'm kind of working with Osama to kind of launch some of these trainings, hopefully in 2023. So you will able to hear more about it. But at the end of it, You can also do your own research. You don't need to wait for us or take certification from us or whatever. And again, as I said, the purpose of these calls are not to sell something. The main purpose is just for you guys to understand it. You can go in the market, find whatever course suited for you. The main goal is just to encourage you to do it. If you can find a coupon or something, or maybe your company is sponsoring that can save the cost, awesome. But if not, then don't just get discouraged by the cost. Try to find the cheapest one if that is what you're looking for, but at least get certifications, get the knowledge, go for the one that you can able to get it quickly. But all of these things can help build your career at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I put here my LinkedIn. If you guys want to reach out to me with any questions, happy to answer and engage with you. Also, I'm like we're in touch, Khurram and I, and we're working together. So if also like if you're bringing him questions and he's bringing me back into picture, I can come and address whatever other questions or any tracks that you guys want to hear more about. I can delve deeper into aspects of Agile if you want to learn more about that as well.
All right, thank you for spending time with us, Sama, and hopefully everybody can able to connect with him, and it will be helpful, I hope. And then in case if you joined late or if you want to forward this video to any of your friends, I should be posting it on my YouTube channel in a day. So hopefully it should be available by tomorrow. And you can either go back if you missed something or if you want to forward it to any of your friends. And then as Sama mentioned, that we will continue some of the Agile knowledge early next year as well. Probably we'll pick up some specific areas, maybe specific track itself or a specific area, and then probably provide some more details. So you should be able to benefit from the knowledge. Thanks a lot, Sama, for joining. It was lovely. I also learned a couple of new things today as well. I hope everybody else has gained some new knowledge that would be helpful in your careers in some way or form. With that, thanks a lot. Take care.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of the day, and we'll meet you early 2023.
Thanks. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.